Alright, hey guys, this is Tuesday, 5/5, so May 5th, which is a Tuesday. And so what we're going to do today is going to continue our lesson. And so we're going to be on pages 474 through 476. So you need to read page 474 through 476. Okay, so once you do that, you can come back and I'll clean it up with you. So the first thing on page 474 is carrying capacity. And so the maximum number of organisms of a species that an ecosystem can support is the carrying capacity. So it's the maximum number of organisms of a species that an ecosystem can support. And so the carrying capacity is simply, you can think about it again as we talked about yesterday with the tolerance range and the optimal range. So the tolerance range was basically the suitable factors that an organism could live in, and then the optimal range was where that they live the best in this certain range. Similarly, the carrying capacity for this ecosystem is going to be the total number of organisms that the ecosystem could allow to live. And so that's the carrying capacity. So for some ecosystems, depending on what animal you're talking about, it may be in the hundreds, it may be in the thousands, and for other organisms, it may be in the tens, or even lower. May only one or two may only be able to survive. So the carrying capacity is simply the amount of organisms of a specific species that an ecosystem will allow to survive. So that is going to be your carrying capacity. Next, you have biodiversity. The number and variety of species living within an ecosystem is biodiversity. An ecosystem's carrying capacity for one species is dependent upon the biodiversity of other species in the ecosystem. All organisms are interconnected. For instance, if no leaves are produced, there will be fewer insects, and with fewer insects available for food, many birds will not survive. So the biodiversity, kind of the diversity of nature, the diversity of organisms within an ecosystem is going to affect the carrying capacity for each species. Like it says, if you have little leaves, then you're not going to have any insects, and so then that's going to affect how many birds are going to be that ecosystem is going to be able to carry. And so the carrying capacity for a ecosystem that doesn't have leaves is going to be lower for birds than an ecosystem that has a bunch of leaves, which then produces a bunch of insects, which then means many birds can thrive and feast on the insects. Next, we have biochemical cycles. And so energy moves in one direction, and God has provided a means of returning that energy back to the organism that used it. So nutrient cycles or biochemical cycles recycle minerals and other nutrients into the environment. Next, you have the hydraulic cycle, which is the water cycle. It's the continuous recycling of water between the earth and the atmosphere. Then you have the atmospheric cycle, which involves the recycling of nutrients found mainly in gaseous form in the atmosphere. Then you have the sedimentary cycle, such as the phosphorus cycle, recycle nutrients found in soil and rocks. All of these processes we see evidence of a divine plan designed to show God's glory and power, as it says in Romans 1:20. So those are the different types of cycles. Next, we have changing factors. Sometimes an ecosystem exists in a stable state in which the abiotic and biotic factors remain essentially unchanged. Organisms thrive, and most species are at their carrying capacities. Remember, abiotic is without life, so those things that are not living. And biotic factors are those that are those living factors. And so often, however, some factor will change, causing a disturbance in the environment. Such a disturbance could be caused by a natural disaster, a disease that kills many species, or a new species migrating into the ecosystem. And again, because these things are interconnected, one will affect the other, and it can be complex when we're looking at what affects what. Ecological succession. Often a natural disaster such as a volcano or fire will kill most of all species in an ecosystem. The ecosystem will appear to remain barren for some time, but slowly and at first unobserved, new organisms will migrate and rebuild the ecosystem. First, microorganisms like bacteria and fungi will prepare the ecosystem for the growth of the larger organisms. Various types of plants will begin to grow. As the plants grow, animals that depend on those plants will come and use the plants for either food or shelter. And then after several decades, a new stable ecosystem will have grown up. This process where a new ecosystem develops after an ecosystem is damaged or destroyed is called ecological succession. Ecological succession also occurs when agricultural fields or other land cleared for human use is abandoned, but in this case the process can proceed more quickly because some organisms are already present. And so ecological succession is basically what happens when an environment is damaged, an ecosystem is damaged, and then over time the ecosystem kind of rebuilds itself and replenishes itself. This also has application to like human things. So example, we go in and we clear out a bunch of land and build a city on it. Over time, if that city is abandoned, then the ecosystem will basically take back over that land, take back over that city. And so it may take generations, it may take thousands of years, depending on the city and how these things pull together, but eventually that ecosystem will rebuild itself. And so that is ecological succession. And so in some cases, a change in an ecosystem may cause some species population to grow above the carrying capacity. This can happen, for example, when favorable conditions allow such rapid reproduction that the death rate cannot keep up with the birth rate. The situation in which the population size is greater than the species carrying capacity is called overpopulation. So when you have a higher birth rate than your fatality rate, your death rate, then what's going to happen is you're going to keep building up, and eventually it's going to be to where the ecosystem can no longer sustain that population for that species. And so that would be overpopulation at that point when you're over your carrying capacity. And so it goes through the layer, describes a couple of those effects of that. And so that will pretty much be the lesson for today. And so what I need you to do to end the lesson is page 476. I need you to do 4 through 7, finish that out. And tomorrow we will have a quiz. So the 6th, you will have quiz 39, so I will not do a video for that day. And so tomorrow, just make sure you get your quiz done. That will be it for today.